Is this microphone placed right?
That's right.
Okay.
Well, it's close enough.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, way to mess up my intro, Jimmy.
Yeah, okay. Sorry.
Hey, Gene. Good to see you, sir. This is the Jimmy Doan Show, ladies and gentlemen. We are live twice a week these days at 4 o'clock, as you can see, right here on Facebook. I also post a very nifty version of the show, all time stamped by subject on YouTube shortly afterward, which makes for easy listening as well. So join us here, join us there, join us wherever you'd like. Today is the 19th of December. So I understand there's no news today.
Not much, I can tell you. It's Jimmy with Counselor Curtis, of course.
Hey, how's it going?
So it's Wednesdays and Sundays.
Yeah,
Wednesday, unfortunately, comes faster than Sunday does after our show. So
whatever excuses.
Yeah, I have excuses. So I didn't get too much. Anyway, I did get a couple things.
Watch us take this hour.
Watch us. Well, maybe not. We'll see. I thought this was interesting. There was a new study put out by some outfit that's a more or less a conservative outfit, and they have reported, it's called Junk News, the Russia report done by anti-conservative academics. What happened was they did a study on the election. They're still back in 2016 on the election and how the Russians, especially, they got on all the social networks, the Twitter and the Facebook and YouTube, and did all this stuff that was pro-Trump. And there was all bots that did all this stuff, and it was a big deal. And what this group did is they investigated it and found out that the amount of money that they bought, was like $250,000 worth.
In terms of hits and likes.
In terms of hits and likes and everything. I mean, now this is how you.
Yeah, I think Shapiro did a little expose.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he said something like, I have more people who just watched this show than were basically for 1 month of show watching than the entire influence of the Russian election.
Well, I mean that's what's so funny about it is because they're still pursuing this as if it's a deal.
Well, as you
there was $2 billion spent on the election.
Doesn't matter. It does. The magnitude of the crime doesn't matter once they've decided you've done something.
Yeah. Well, they're
untoward.
Well, they're still going at it. I thought it was kind of interesting. And finally, there's this study out.
Well, new legs now. And speaking of Russia, I'll just bring us back to Russia real quick. And did you see? We reported last week about the little girl who got released and confessed to Russian interference.
Yeah, what's her name? The 28-year-old?
Butina.
Yeah.
There's a story right now out that says that her new Russian handlers are pissed off that they feel like she was coerced. They're basically making the same argument that we did.
Okay.
So, it's pretty obvious.
So has she been deported? Is she going to jail? What's happening? Do you know?
Well, I don't know. We'll see what she does and says.
Her Russian handlers?
Yeah, I mean, the people, when they turn her over to some diplomats with some attorneys, basically.
Yeah, right.
And they said, you cannot do this.
You cannot do this. That's great. Okay, the next big deal I thought was interesting. Israel is going to launch a lunar mission.
Really?
In February. I mean, you think about it. How many missions have there been to the moon? I mean,
just us.
Well, no, there's been.
No, that's right. The Chinese went up and got our golf ball, right?
Yeah, did they? They're going to auction it off on eBay. No, I think it's. Doesn't Russia have something up there on the moon? Didn't they do a lunar something? But anyway, the Chinese had one. We've got, But anyway, Israel. I mean, I'm thinking. Wait a minute. This is little Israel is going to put something on the moon. It's kind of interesting.
No, it doesn't surprise me that they could do it.
Yeah.
My thought is, why would they do it? I mean, maybe just to, have a flag up there or something. I don't know.
I guess the landing craft is called Genesis, although it's whatever it is in Israeli. Mm-hmm. It will ship in February to Florida, and it'll be propelled by the SpaceX Falcon rocket launch. And the robotic lander will then commence its months-long voyage to the moon. Now, I don't understand. Months-long? I guess it has to go all around, and they're going to use orbital techniques to do something. I guess because it doesn't take that long to get to the moon, does it? 3 days?
Eric,
Max? No, but I mean, isn't it like it's like 3 days, I think, or something? I mean, it's at the speed of light. It's like a minute or 10 seconds.
8 seconds.
Yeah,
or something.
or whatever. Right?
Yeah. Well, we're 250,000 miles, right?
Yeah.
And so, at 10,000 miles an hour, not very long, but yeah. Definitely, they must take advantage of
something. They're going to
the
do
orbital slingshot
Yeah,
thing.
apparently they're going to
something.
orbit the moon for a while before they actually land on it.
Right.
Which makes sense up to a point and everything. So anyway, it's government. It's a government project. It's a little scary. Anyway, roughly the size of a washing machine, faces a difficult, arduous journey because it will have to make several orbits before touching down on the moon. Upon landing, the craft is to relay. They're going to relay photographs and collect data about the moon's ever-changing magnetism. So whatever, fine. But I just thought it was interesting. Little Israel is going to put something up there. Well, of course, with our rocket. So interesting. Okay, France has decided to introduce a tax on large internet and tech firms.
Okay.
France's move to introduce a tax on January 1st can be driven by domestic budget concerns, with the finance ministry looking for new sources of revenue and savings, which of course is a laugh because, as we talked about before, governments are always scratching for the little tiniest piece of revenue that they can get their hands on. And this can only slow down whatever it is. France, of course, was almost last into the internet age because they had the what was it called? It was called PhoneTel or something like that for a while. The government sponsored, which was very successful, a Minitel, I think it was called, and all the businesses at least had this little thing, and you could make your reservations and everything, kind of like with it was like their version of a teletype or something, and that was on for so many years that it kind of shut out the internet for a while.
Right. Well, you sacrifice flexibility
Right.
for momentum.
Right. Exactly.
And so, well, it's interesting that this. Keep going.
Okay. Well, it's interesting. They're looking for on a new so-called. It's a GAFA tax. GAFA.
Oh, I was going to say, France has. If you look at the actual tax percentage of that is how much each country taxes their people, how much they actually take from the people.
Right.
France is way up there.
Yeah, I know.
And I mean that's why you've got people in the streets and such. I think they sense it. They know that they're being taxed the bejesus out of.
I think it's closing in on 50% or something, or maybe.
The last graph I saw said 56%.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean that like.
So, and from my perspective, the deeper the country gets into that, the worse it is. That is, the more.
Always room for another tax.
Well, they get. Everybody gets used to it. Everybody starts to get one. They've got theirs. How come I don't have mine? And it starts to get very backstabby. And of course, you know what they do in Italy is they just tax fraud. They just ignore it.
Yeah.
You know?
Evasion is a way of life.
That's it.
In Italy, yeah.
You tax the bejesus out of them, and then you just some people just don't pay.
Right.
So
how many? When you figure, I don't know how big Italy is. 20 million, 30 million, or whatever it is. But how many cops do you have to? How many IRS agents do you have to have if nobody's paying? And of course you can't. Yeah, well, you always make sure you pay them. So anyway, the GAFA tax is named after Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon. They go after the rich people to ensure the global giants pay their fair share of taxes on their massive business operations. The tax will be introduced whatever happens on January 1st, and it will be for the whole of 2019, and it's going to be probably around $570 million. Now, I don't know what their budget is, but France's budget has got to be in the multi-billions for sure. I mean, our budget is like three or 4 trillion, and so I mean, I wouldn't doubt that their that the take in France is in the hundreds of billions.
yeah.
And so here we are talking about a $500 million increase. It's just amazing. So,
But think of all the discouragement they can ladle on top of all those innovators
Yeah, no, they do. It says here the state takes about 45% of all the revenue.
Okay.
It's got about the highest taxes in the world. The average, for instance, tax is twice as high as the Americans' average tax. And of course, they as you know, it's the French bureaucracies that get supported. You can't fire those guys. Same here, of course. That's one of the things we've got. Bureaucracies. What's interesting in a private business, when the bureaucracy gets too big, they either restructure and fire all the middle management or something, or they go out of business. So, governments don't go out of business. Great. Okay. The deal was that what I talked about here at the first was the report that was this outfit said the report's bunk. However,
Which report?
this was the one that was done by this is the one I just talked about. The Oxford University Computational Propaganda Project and Grafica argued that fake accounts, ads, tweets are all clearly sought to benefit the Republican Party, especially Donald Trump. And they found that a lot of that stuff was done by bots, and it was no money, didn't really affect anything, blah, blah, blah. However, not to be outdone, our legislature, as they called it, I read this, I think it's an editorial, it might be an opinion piece.
By our, you mean Florida?
No, the Washington DC. Wake-up call, quote unquote. Lawmakers react to the reports detailing Russia's influence campaign. A new pair of reports, this is the one before this, the one I talked about before, detailing the extent of Russia's social media propaganda efforts in the 2016 and beyond, reveal how much still needs to be done to counter misinformation. Lawyers, said the other day. Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, the ranking member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, which of course he's going to be, I guess, head of it now, starting in January, prepared for his panel attained by NBC News. I hope these reports will spur legislative action in the Congress and provide additional clarity to the American public about Russia's assault on our democracy. And of course, this is so bogus. I just can't believe it. The reports lay out how Russian agents used major platforms like Facebook and YouTube to spread disinformation, temper the minority vote, and boost Trump's presidency. Which you're sitting there thinking, when what we do, of course, is we get caught with the what's her name in over there, not in Kiev, but down there on the Mediterranean, the Ukraine, and the ambassador's on there saying, "Now look, here's what we got to do." And they tapped her phone, or they caught her, and they nabbed them, trying to influence the thing down there in the Ukraine.
Right.
And and you're sitting there, pot, kettle, black, whatever.
Well, right. It's, to me, it's a little different from that. It's either. I think that there's a certain group of people who are legitimately worried about the proliferation of false information. I think they're a small group, though, because I think that most people understand that the cure for bad information is just more information. You don't try to limit information. What you do is you just put out the correct information. And that's the only way you can do it, because if you try to limit the spread of the bad information, then you have to have somebody who is the determiner of which information is good and bad.
And you can bet. And we've already seen this, where something like the Southern Poverty Law Center is calling out hate groups.
Well, sure, exactly. Well, and look, there is definitely a group of people who recognize the power in being able to determine who the bad speakers are. But I think the majority of people understand. I mean, there are so many outlets and venues that it's just like, you're not gonna limit anybody these days. It's like one group or this group can stop working with this group or that group, but messages are easy to get out there.
Right, but don't you think that sometimes it becomes confusing to people? They don't know which to do. I mean, I do. You hear a perfectly good argument on this side and a perfectly good argument on this side, and you're going like, well, yeah, okay, you've convinced me. Which one?
Well, that's right. And so the solution, I mean, in that scenario, what we anticipate, that what we expect in nature is either that person will go along with their buddy, who they believe is more informed than they are, or they'll become more informed and make a better choice. But I mean, that doesn't mean that they're going to be perfectly informed at any one time. What we're saying is, though, that misinformation, imperfect information on one side is going to balance out perfect information on the other side. So you just don't have to worry about it. It's a wash. So I mean, you just don't have to worry about fake news. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. It's all a wash. Look, it's like the Inquirer. Nobody ever tried to silence the Inquirer.
No.
You had the Star. You had all these magazines out there that were putting out ridiculous stories. No effect. No effect. Everybody understood when you saw a magazine, even if you didn't know what it was. If the first cover story was aliens just abducted your mom, then it's definitely falls into that.
I gotta read that.
Right, exactly.
Really?
And of course, they try little tricks now, as you know, as if you read a news stream from any of the major sources, it'll be news, sponsored.
You're right.
News, sponsored. News, and the sponsored ones have great headlines.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because they pay for those.
Right.
Man. That's big money.
It's interesting you should mention that, because when I go through on Facebook or something like this, and you see they're very good about this. At least they put sponsored on.
Right.
In little tiny press.
Right.
I skip over those. I mean,
Absolutely.
You have to.
You have to. That's
Right.
You're crazy. It's not what it purports to be.
Well,
Whereas
Scott Adams was talking about this the other day. He said that he was listening to something. I don't know whether it was. He was talking about a debate between the climate people and the climate denier or whatever it is people. I think it was, and he said they didn't address the central question, but their arguments. Or I don't know if it's this one or another one, but basically he said he listened to something, and both arguments that were opposite sounded very reasonable. Okay, fine, okay, but now what? I mean, and of course, one of the things that I think is that ultimately the truth will out. I mean, eventually the truth has to come out because it's nature. I mean, if you're going to say global warming, for instance, at some point it either does or it doesn't. I mean, right now they've stretched it out. They've moved the goalposts out to 2040 or something, and who knows when we get to 2040, then it'll be 2060. I don't know. But these people, they're trying to get all the money in the world. They get the grants. They still get the grants, and people just graduating now from high school are going to go into the climate business and get a grant, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, so those are two examples of what we just talked about. I mean, here the information will come out eventually, and so and I've been reading and watching YouTube videos about various arguments on both sides of the climate debate.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. It's been quite interesting as well. And I found the same thing, which is you listen to one and you listen to the other side, and you're like, oh, okay, they both make sense. But then really take a close look, like go back and listen to one again, and I realized what the differences were. And I'm like, okay, still, there's, you just, like, that's the way you get over misinformation, is more information. And so, that's...
Well, some of this stuff, of course, when you look at some of this stuff, on its face, and this is very often this happens, on its face it just can't be. And that's one of the things that I get when I see some government report that comes out and claims whatever the heck is some big, horrible calamity. I'm thinking, wait a minute, that just doesn't make sense. I mean, I'd see that.
I agree. There are some things which are on their face wrong. I sent you a video, one guy talking about climate stuff, and one of the things I didn't like in his video, even though he seemed to have some good points, is at several points in the video he said the only solution to X problem is Y solution.
Really?
And he said that in several different times. And to me, as a scientifically minded person, when somebody says only, you got to be real careful with superlatives.
Yeah. Right. Exactly right.
I'd love to do a global warming segment at some point because I think there's a lot of information out there. But from my perspective, there's nothing on the table from the left that is to say we're out of the Paris Accord. There are no bills in Congress that are floating around.
Didn't even go to the Polish one.
Right,
He's not going to waste the airplane fuel.
That would be environmentally unsound.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't seem as though there's really anything up for debate other than your choice of candidate, whether or not your candidate announces their belief as to one side or the other, right? That seems to be an issue at that level. But I think the more important issue, which if we're ready to move on,
Yep.
the economy.
Yes.
This is very interesting. We have several big multi-100-point drop days.
Okay.
And obviously, that doesn't mean as much as it used to
No,
now that we're at
not at
25,000. But there are some people, like obviously perpetual bear Peter Schiff,
Right.
who are claiming that this is indeed
This is the one. This is it.
indeed it.
This time, yeah.
Right, and it shouldn't surprise us since we've been talking about it for 10 years or something.
Right.
Or, okay, maybe not that long since it was just 10 that the last one happened, but 5 years.
Yeah.
So, okay, and I mean, from my perspective, if the economy crashes, I think Trump's going to get a lot more political heat than, which is, if that's even possible.
Yeah. Well, that's it.
Because it'll be like his shields are down, like his shields are at maximum right now at 25,000 Dow. You get to say at least everybody's happy. If all of a sudden everybody loses their shirt, then
Well, you only need a couple of people to jump out of the building in New
Yeah.
York. So I think that was the meme in 1929, where a couple of people jumped out. When of course when you think about it, the number of people that were actually invested in that had stocks, well, not that many.
no, not 1929.
Yeah, not today, where all of your pension funds, for instance,
Yeah.
are in that thing. So when that happens, when the crash comes, and I think that Peter Schiff is right in that it's got to come someday. This is unsustainable. Of course,
Right.
we've talked about it being unsustainable for 8 years.
That's the crazy part.
That's the
is
crazy
that
part.
it's hard to talk about it at this point. But as you just mentioned, whatever is unsustainable is ultimately unsustainable. At some point, there has to be some type of correction. I mean, I was kind of waiting for irrational exuberance. I don't know if we were there or not. I mean, at 25,000, like the old memes go when you walk out of the stock exchange and the shoe shine guy gives you a stock tip,
Right.
Then you know. Yeah,
Right?
when once everybody's getting in because it's just glorious glory days, nothing can fail, nothing can go wrong kind of thing. That's when you almost know it's going to head back down the other way. But
Yeah, that's true. When everybody's one way, then it's got to go. There's no place to go but down. It's at some point. So, but my point is that most people don't know that they're invested in the stock market because they got their 401ks or whatever. The government has been a huge sponsor in that way of the stock market, because the pension funds and retirement funds must be invested in the stock market, basically.
I wonder what the computer algorithms, which were responsible for the vast majority of trading these days,
Lots of it.
will do if there's a big crash.
Well, they have what they call stop gaps. Or
I know, but
they have-
then the next day it just
Yeah,
opens
right.
up and it's down
Right,
700, down 700, down. I mean, are they going to really do that? Stop it several times. It'll be interesting to see how the computers play the game against the humans.
The other day, wasn't that long ago, sometime in the last year, I believe that they did have a glitch.
Right. Oh yeah.
That it bounced and then came right back again.
Right. Which is totally understandable. But if the machines believe
The machine.
right, well, if the
I mean, you talk about Skynet?
well, yeah, if
Skynet's got a hold of the market.
V'ger and Hal and the other machines believe that the crash is in.
The crash is in, Dave.
It's it. That's it. They get out. Sell now. But of course, they would come online and say, "I don't think we're going to sell until after lunch, V'ger. You don't have to sell
Right.
now."
Yeah.
And the computer's talking to each other in that
Yeah.
machine language that only they understand.
Right.
And one's trying to coax the other one into not selling before.
Sending their zeros and ones and the zeros and ones.
Well, you wonder. It'll be interesting to see. But of course, it would suck to have a big sucky crash.
But I don't see how we can avoid it myself. I mean, things are just so far out of whack. They just totally are out of whack.
It does seem like we've been in fantasy land for
When
decades.
you think about it for a second, the computers, of course, have algorithms that they deal on. But as we've seen in the past, the Black Scholes thing. There was at least one hedge fund that was founded on the Black Scholes this is the guy that these two people won a Nobel Prize for being able to essentially predict the stock market or tell how it was, and of course, so at least at least one of those guys was in a hedge fund that used this algorithm, but they didn't like it. So a guy started meddling with it. A person actually went and said, no, I don't care what you're saying. And of course the thing folded. I mean, you didn't let the computer do what it wanted to do. I mean, and this is one of the things you realize is, and this is that I really believe, and I've learned this from Scott Adams, is most decisions are based on emotion. And you think about it, fear is a huge emotion. All politicians know this. They scare the bejesus out of you. They tell you the Russians are coming, and whatever it is, and so the deal is that they try and when you realize that so many of your decisions are based on emotion rather than logic.
The logic is just there to serve the emotion.
I suppose,
the logic is just there to help the emotion get what it wants.
There's a lot of truth to that, but I'm reminded, for instance, we were just talking about the global warming, and the one guy, this Michael Mann, who has this hockey stick thing, and of course the way they show the hockey stick, and it makes perfect sense. They get a glass of water, and they put an ice cube in it. So they stick a thermometer in there, and as you know this, the water is 32 degrees or whatever the ice cube temperature is. As it melts, it keeps it at 32 degrees as it's heating up. And then when the ice cube is gone, suddenly it really starts to warm up. Hockey stick. So who can argue with that? Well, apparently it's he sued. Of course, he sued. What's his name? Mark Stein. Mark Stein called him out on that. The Canadian guy that substitutes for Russia every once in a while, I love him, but he's made some joke about it, and so the hockey stick guy sued him, and is still in court in Washington D.C. after 8 years or 7 years. Sued him for defamation, and they haven't come to anything.
Yeah, I checked that temperature. I've been going over it and over it and over. There's a bunch of different graphs, and there's a bunch of different people who say that the graphs from 2000 have been, that reflect the temperature in 1975 are different from the graphs from 2015, which reflect the temperature from 1975. There's a whole bunch of stuff which, like I said, at some point we might want to get back into it, and
we will. But just to get out of this last thing is one of the things that they did do an expose on was where these measuring places were. They had changed.
Well, that's what I've been saying.
All of a sudden it was an airport where before it was out in the middle of a farmer's field.
Right. Well, not only that, but it wasn't anywhere 10,000 years ago, or it was out in the ocean, or or what actually
under an ice cube.
Right. There's different crazy different. So and there's so many different things we can get into in terms of the global warming debate, but I think our central point was just that it's all just about information, and you just put the more information out there, the better. That's the way.
I agree with you on that. Okay, I got one last thing here, and that is about Venezuela.
Okay.
I thought it was interesting that Maduro has said that if somebody invades his country, they'll not make it out alive. Has warned his regime's imperialist foes in the United States, Colombia, and Brazil that their troops will not make it out alive if they dare to invade a single inch of Venezuela's sacred soil. Addressing thousands of armed members of Venezuela's Bolivarian militia in Caracas, he declared himself a warrior of peace who hoped to bring happiness and prosperity to his crumbling nation. So this is talk about delusion. This is amazing.
Well, this is the death throes of
I'm reminded of what Saddam Hussein said with his Imperial Guard or whatever before George Bush I invaded, and which was in 91 or 92 or something. 90.
No. I mean, what was it? What did he say?
Oh, he said, you come on, we're going to annihilate you. He said our
is that Iraqi?
It was right. That's right. We have everybody, and we are going to come on our soil, and by God, we are going to annihilate you.
That's what you say.
Well, what I thought was interesting, of course, about that, and we all saw it, was the guy the minister of propaganda or whatever, whoever it was, and he spoke English and everything like. He was on top of a building, detailing how it was going, as the American troops were invading, literally in his backyard. Were coming, and well, we're going to turn them away, and they're not going to make it. Then as bullets are flying all over the place. Just, I mean, you talk about delusion. So I think that Nicholas is, like you say, this is the dying throes.
This is a case study in what does a dictator do as their power is crumbling.
And it's what's so interesting is why, with all the money you've got, why don't you hoof it out of there and move to Geneva?
Ultimately.
Well, Saddam Hussein didn't. He's an idiot.
Well, the problem with leaving is as soon as you leave, your buffers are gone. While you're in there, you can maintain a crumbling empire for a long, long time, really.
Okay.
Dictators have done it for a long time. The people will, if you can just make it tolerable for the people, they'll let you do whatever you want to do, and you can have a little kingdom inside. People have done it for centuries. But and as soon as you leave, they could just bag you. And then once you're bagged, it's over. So you have to be real careful to take the reins of power, especially in a situation where you're using force like he is.
Yeah.
Because you can't ever give it up, really, when it comes down to it.
Like holding on to the tail of a tiger?
That's it, man. It's, what does Castro do at the end? I mean, and of course, what happens if your last 10 years you're incapacitated in some way? If you haven't groomed your successor, who is committed to taking care of you for some reason other than that you're giving them power.
Yeah. Well, but it's interesting though that you do see a little bit something against that in what's happened in China, is how their middle class has just skyrocketed. Even though they're a communist, dictatorship.
Well, as we talked about before, though, when we named off the various parts of the sectors of the economy that have become capitalist, it's huge. Essentially, what's happened is, and it's probably happened just right in spite of the communist government.
Right.
What I imagine is the communist government is quite inept, and people got together and innovated and created businesses, and then all of a sudden they were just there. And so then the communists were like, well, okay, they're there, so I guess we'll tax them or something.
Yeah, I think you'd have to go over there and find out. I mean, that's a little speculation.
Total. I'm making stuff up.
Making it up as you go.
I'm making stuff up at this point. But that's my only way I can imagine 40 rocket companies coming into existence in China.
Yeah.
And as we talked about before, the publishing companies that are publishing anti-communist propaganda, and they're publishing companies. I mean, their whole job is to put the word out there.
Yeah.
How do they stay hidden? And so the only explanation is that they're not staying hidden. They're just somehow not all being prosecuted, or they're not being run down. They're being allowed to exist for some reason or other, and probably for their tax base. That is to say, they're probably just. It's probably the way we do our marijuana industry over here. Like, all right, it's illegal, but if you pay us, I guess we won't come arrest you.
Yeah.
So, which, by the way, New York State is apparently getting ready to go recreational. I think, or is it New York State or New York City? Cuomo.
Well, Cuomo's that's he's
the
that's
governor
the
or the mayor? Okay.
Yeah, that would be the state.
So. He said he's going to make
the
that
mayor
happen.
is de Blasio.
That's right, yeah. So, I got a treat for us here. I'm going to bring us to a vacation spot with live video here. So, our favorite vacation spot. Kablamo!
Look at that. Where am I? I'm sorry, I'm not at your vacation spot.
Well, you're at a vacation spot. Looks a little gray there. But that's like a snowmass or someplace. That's a Breckenridge or something.
Fire in the background there. That's good. All right.
And I'm indeed. So, couple of things here which I can bring up.
Good.
Since we got a little time. Let's see. Oh, the Senate passed the criminal justice bill.
Okay, yes.
Yes.
And now, is that a good deal?
It,
Now, isn't this the one? Is this the one that is possibly going to result in some felons being freed or something?
no.
No.
I mean, yes and no. It is, but that's a good thing. That is to say, it's going to get Martha Stewart type felons out.
Ah,
Okay. What we have is our prisons are full of people who didn't really do anything wrong.
Okay.
And non-violent people who broke a rule here or there. Now, this unfortunately is not going to address the big issue. This is like a little band-aid. This is a little federal band-aid. This is why I get so much support. And they say they passed criminal justice reform, but they didn't really. What this is going to do is allow the wardens in the various states greater leeway in terms of who they parole.
Okay. Well, okay.
It's a good thing.
Okay.
Because look, wardens and prisons are not like looking to turn violent people out onto the streets.
But are you telling me that the wardens are not like Shawshank Redemption warden?
Well, no, he was trying to keep people in, right? Yeah, and that's what they're like. They're trying to keep people in.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about them letting people out. The people that they need to let out are people who are, convicted of driving with a suspended license, even though they had no accidents and no DUIs, and they're in prison.
Well, of course not. This is a federal law, right?
Well, exactly. That's
So
the other thing.
DUI is not federal.
I know, and that's the other thing I wanted to clarify, and that is, this is only for a limited group of people. This is not like everybody, everywhere, every crime.
Right.
And it really is, it's called the first step
Okay.
law, and it really is just a first step. I mean, I like it. The only thing I don't like about it is I don't want people to resist criminal justice reform in the future by pointing back to this reform and saying, "Oh, look, we did criminal justice
already did
reform,
it, yeah.
in 2018." So look, we just did that. And I'm sure that's going to happen to some extent, because obviously people who are not that closely associated with criminal justice system or reform are going to wonder why there wasn't more substantive reform, if that's our argument, in this package as opposed to what we're talking about then. But from my perspective, you need to get rid of mandatory minimums.
Oh, yeah.
You need to hack off large portions of the maximum sentences, bring those back down a whole level, establish an even lower level crime. But that's all mostly state reforms and things like that.
Right.
The facts don't have anything to do with it. So anyway, it is what it is. It's a first step, like we said. Okay. No government shutdown, it looks like.
Right. Apparently, did the Donald cave?
Yes.
Okay, he caved.
Yes.
Not like him.
No, but we talked about this.
But I mean, didn't he say that we're now going to pay for it?
Well, what he said was, our new deal with Mexico that replaced NAFTA is so good, it's as if Mexico is paying for it.
Okay, yeah, okay, good, well.
Whatever, but he's still not going to build a wall. I mean, anybody who's hoping for a wall, I'm sorry, there's not ever going to be a wall. It's too.
Really?
Yeah, because it's not a real project. If you look, most of the illegal immigrants that we have here are people who come here legally,
right,
and then overstay their visas and such,
and disappear into the ground.
Yeah, and so build a wall all you want. You can, even if it was an impassable wall, which by the way it certainly won't be.
Right.
Your numbers that you're going to cut down on for your $5 billion, it's a political pawn piece thing. Mm-hmm. So you might as well just declare victory and say we got it. It's up.
Well, I'll tell you one person that is going to be making a big poop.
Ann Coulter.
Ann Coulter. She is really. I mean,
she's pissed off.
Boy, she really is. She does.
Look, get over it, Ian. Look, again, I'm for amnesty, let them alone, whatever. There's no reason. You're never getting them out.
Years ago we talked about this on the original Jimmy Dome show about
The number of buses it would take.
yeah, the number of buses, which literally stretch from Maine to the border. That's first of all. And then, after you round up the first busload, the rest of them are going to be like roaches.
Blow by.
They're going to
Yeah.
disappear into the woodwork.
Yeah, and I am not of the Tucker Carlson mind that immigrants are worthless.
Boy, he got pooped on for that, didn't he? Holy smokes. I mean, you talk about
Shit the shit. That like you said, 30-year and stuff too.
well, but if you look at the whole thing, it wasn't that much.
No, I know, but they were able to cherry
They
what they wanted.
They totally did. I mean, you have to listen. If you listen to the whole thing, it's not that bad.
No,
But they really picked out the center piece there where he mentioned Little Dirty and
Right.
whatever was it, and of course the big
he
advertising.
said rapists.
Yeah, I mean the advertisers flew out of there. I read a list of the 14 major ones that
Oh yeah,
had given up.
ditched.
It ditched him. Yeah. So
Well,
I thought as far as the advertisers were concerned, one of the things is that it might be time for some low-level advertiser like the Jimmy Dome Show to go in there and sponsor them. And sure. I mean, well, the rates might drop.
Right.
So
Yeah, I have a feeling he will find plenty of replacement advertisers.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
It's governed by larger forces than what he says in one little segment, I think.
I think so too. Yeah, because when you look at it, his segments are what? They're like a minute long. I mean, he'll have somebody in there, and they'll talk back and forth, and thank you very much. And they don't talk back and forth for more than about 2 minute stops.
Right.
So, and then they move on to the next segment.
All right, let's see. Oh, and of course, one thing about the stock market we should mention is the Fed did raise rates today.
Okay, now what are they up to?
2 or 2.5 or something.
Is that right?
2. I don't know. I have, I keep seeing different numbers. I'll have to check.
We can look it up.
But-
Well, the thing that I am really kind of amazed about, the one thing that I've watched as a bellwether, and a lot of other people do too, as a bellwether for the economy, is the 10-year note. Which the 10-year note used to be, like around 2% or something, and it very slowly rose to a little over 3%, and now it's back down under 3%, which means that there's some kind of confidence somewhere. And if people are willing to put their 10-year money away at 2.8%, which of course is, you can call inflation whatever you want. You can look at the government estimate of what inflation is, which is a joke. The fact is that you're losing money at 3%. You are losing money. You put your money in at 3%.
So why are people willing to do that?
That's what I'm saying. Why are they willing to do it? Now, some of them have a mandate to do it, I suppose, and there's other governments where it's worse over there, I suppose, and so they can put line up some U.S. dollars, convert your Zimbabwe dollars or whatever it is into U.S. dollars,
Right.
and stuff it in there for 10 years, knowing that it's not going to go to 10,000 to 1 in the next 10 years.
Yeah. I mean, if you're living in Venezuela, that 10-year note's looking great.
Looking great, that's for sure.
All right, a little international news real quick. So we didn't talk about this at all, but Russia and the Ukraine are in a little bit of a little scuffle.
Well, they always have been.
Well, it seems to be a little bit heating up a little bit.
Really?
It seems to be. Yeah.
Now you understand that eastern part of Ukraine is basically Russian.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the
of course the
controverted.
And of course the Russians want their base,
Right.
which is part of the eastern part of Ukraine.
Yeah.
But then the western part, of course, of Ukraine is where that's where our ambassador was. It was saying let's overthrow or something like that.
Right. Well, I thought it was interesting. This week, the Ukrainians started tossing their politicians into dumpsters.
What? No.
I got a great video of it, but I don't want to stream it because I don't know if I'll get a fair use violation. But yeah, there's great videos online if you Google Ukraine politician into dustbin, where every time they come out of the parliament, a bunch of people bag them and and throw them into the.
That would be a message that you couldn't. I mean, that's better than a letter.
Right. And
A scathing letter. How about this?
get in the dumpster.
Get in the dumpster.
And they were showing some people like they were like going, okay, I'll get in. I'll get in.
Okay.
So interesting.
That's the. I guess that's the ultimate in protest.
Yeah. And then one thing else. I'll take us over to Syria.
Oh yeah, we're supposed to withdraw from there.
That's
now.
right.
That is great. You always put me in the worst places.
What?
Yeah.
It's not me. It's
I know
the transporter.
it's the transporter, right? It has a mind of its own.
It does. Now, so it looks like we're in the same spot at different times. I'm in the before picture. You're in the after picture.
So not only have you gone, you've teleported in time and space.
Well, yeah, our
Okay.
teleporter is like a Wayback Machine.
That's
also.
right, way back.
So you can see the mosque looks beautiful. This is a mosque in Aleppo or I should say looked beautiful because,
Today it's rubble.
yeah, it is no moss.
That's right. The mosque is no mosque. Good.
So, but he said, we're out. Trump says we're out. Now, I think, from my perspective, when I hear Trump say he's going to do something, I have a little bit more faith than I do in the average politician.
Okay.
So I feel like there probably will be some drawdown of whatever troops we have there.
Never understood why we're there in the first place.
Well, that's the whole point.
It was a proxy war with Russia, was in there.
Well, it's this weird thing because everybody is sort of, okay, are we fighting ISIS? Are we fighting, this Daesh?
Taliban or
the
whatever.
Taliban? Yeah, exactly.
That's it. So now they said, well, they've got a hold of the Taliban. What I thought was interesting about this
Mm-hmm.
was the number of people that still think that, we want regime change over there.
Right.
And I'm thinking, wait a minute. Haven't you had enough trouble with regime change? All you have to do is get rid of Assad.
Well,
and-
that's what I thought it was funny. Shapiro was talking about this is bad. It's bad when we pull out of there because they'll create a power vacuum, and then other groups will move in there and take power. And I'm so what?
Yeah,
And
right.
Then what?
He's he is a bit of a warmonger.
I know. But that's what I'm getting at is everybody who needs us in this area should ask themselves the question: is there some strategic reason why we need to be there? Is there an imminent existential threat that is emanating from this area right now?
Well, here's the deal that I'm looking at. If the Israelis can send a station wagon sized whatever it is to the moon, don't you think they could put something over in Iraq or Syria or whatever their enemy would be on a little tiny rocket?
Yeah, well, is your assertion that we don't need to be over there to protect Israel? Because
Right, that is exactly my assertion.
Right, and I fully agree with that.
They
and
are
the only people
fully
who are going
well
to
and
be
able to protect themselves.
I agree. The only people group I think we would be abandoning are, of course, the Kurds and like those hill Christians or whatever. There's some small groups there that we've befriended along the way. If we hustle it out of there, the Turks will go give the Kurds some problems. Look, at some point.
Not my problem. Not my problem. I don't need to lose American lives
Well,
in
that's
the
what-
defense of this. Well, you're going to send our teenagers over there. For God's sakes, what are you
I know,
thinking about?
I know.
Here's people that are going to come back here. First of all, if they don't get killed, which they
Right.
probably won't, okay, the attrition rate, but they're going to come back damaged goods.
Yeah.
They're going to have seen death. I remember
Or
when
done death.
they're going to see guts all over the place.
Yeah.
And I know that a friend of mine, I'll never forget, we did when I was 50 years ago, a friend of mine was a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And one of their classes was a desensitization class.
Oh, Jesus.
They would show movies
Right.
of people being carved up, dead, blood, and everything like that. And they would get it to the point where they wouldn't throw up.
Right.
And now you can go in and operate.
Right.
You had seen it before. Well, this is the same kind of, but you don't have PTSD. You're just desensitized to that particular thing. But if you were over there
Yeah.
and you've seen, children gutted, blown up, arms, legs, every place, and you're thinking, and then you come home after having, are you
It's
kidding
just
me?
not us. It's just not the universe that Americans want to live in.
No.
We want to have a little school,
Right.
And some barbecue,
That's right.
football game,
Playground.
right? Exactly.
Swings.
And nobody wants to be shooting anybody in rubble-filled Aleppo.
No.
So I'm with you, and somebody, and I guess it was Shapiro also was saying, I don't understand how now that we have an all volunteer military, why there's not more incentive for us to maintain a military presence in these foreign countries.
Well, he's young. That's the thing. He's only in his mid-30s.
Yeah,
And of course he is very concerned about Israel. I understand that. And I suppose, but still, it is one of these
I
things
think
that
he
we've talked.
just seems to buy into the concept of we have to be everywhere.
Yeah, right. And of course, one of the things is, we're in like 100 countries or something like that, bases all over the place, and you got to ask, they still think that we're supposed to be the world's policemen, but why?
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll see what Trump does.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Well, it'd be good enough to at least to get out of Syria. That'd be one thing if they can do that.
Yeah.
And have to pull out of every place else, as far as I'm concerned.
Yep. All right. I got one. We had two notable deaths this week. We had Lavern.
Yes, she was only 73 or something.
75.
75, yeah.
And actually, last week, Clint Eastwood's girlfriend, Lynn Halsey Taylor. That was her character name, anyway.
Where was she? What was she in?
She was in Any Which Way But Loose and Every Which Way You Can, and a bunch of Clint Eastwood movies.
Okay, well, I was thinking
she was a blonde girl in a bunch of his movies.
Yeah, was she in that one where? Let's see, was that Clint Eastwood? That one where the killers were on the boardwalk or something, and he saved that girl. I don't know. I'll see if that's who it was. Yeah, but she was in a bunch of his movies.
Yeah. I think that was her, if I'm thinking of the same movie that you're thinking of. All right, this is important, and why
why you stayed to listen to the end. Don't go away yet. We have more to say. We got another couple of minutes here before we have to.
That's right. All right, tech update.
Tech update.
Yes. They are flirting around with new gun technology that instead of using the old hammer onto the blasting cap, that you have fully encased cartridges which are electronically triggered.
I don't know. I haven't seen anything about that. So electronically, like what? From your iPhone?
Well, no. Like the trigger puts a little electrical jolt through there, which triggers the cartridge.
Okay.
So in other words, not moving parts that could affect your aim. The hammer's not. Now of course you're still going to get the kick of the gun,
right,
which is going to be the majority of the thing. But I thought it was interesting. And then also drone delivery of medicine in foreign countries.
Right, big deal.
To remote areas.
Right.
Is becoming more prevalent.
Right.
In Vanuatu, the little island country, they delivered some medicine in 25 minutes, whereas it would have taken hours and hours to cross by foot the canyons and stuff. So
wow.
Real interesting.
Where is Vanuatu? Is that in the South Pacific somewhere?
Yeah, I think so. They did a Survivor there at one point. It's a little...
I was just reading this in my amateur radio magazine where they do what they call de-expeditions, and they had one that was down the south, some of the islands out there that are really rare. People that I used to do this, and you get in there to say you made this contact with this island.
Oh, okay.
And you get a little card or something like that from them.
Okay,
it's a big deal. Yeah. So anyway, that's one of them that's rare.
So
for those of you who are radio operators.
So interesting though. Everybody's talking about the first wave of drone stuff will of course not be manned things, but it will be delivery all over the place.
Yeah. Well, I know they're using them in Africa. They're going to the isolated villages, I guess.
Right.
Deliver the Ebola virus or something like that. Not the virus, but the cure. I'm sorry.
Whoops.
Whoops. I'm sorry, what package was that? Oh,
Don't open that. So, all right, that is all I have got.
Okay, well, we're about done. So we just want to tell you that if you people that are watching or listening or whatever, you can always send us a request for something. No nudity, no nudes. A request for what you want to hear about. That's great.
That's right, and we'll be happy to blow that off.
Yep.
No, but hey, thanks for joining us, everybody. Looks like we had a few people here. Bart and Jeffrey and Kelly, Chad, buddy. We really appreciate it. Hope you guys got something out of the show here. We do this twice a week these days at 4 o'clock, right here on the Facebook channel. I post a version of it right up, the full version, but it's all time-stamped. All the subjects are time-stamped on YouTube. It'll go up in about a couple of hours from now. Makes it a little bit easier to watch. So
You can skip ahead.
that's right. Let's see.
Skip ahead to the non-boring parts.
So anyway, thanks for joining us, everybody.
We'll see you Sunday.
Yes, we will.
You're gonna thank our.
Yeah, I got
Need to thank our music person.
That's right. You're listening to Kevin MacLeod here. Ladies and gentlemen, this is called Fork and Spoon. Earlier you were listening to Rocket Power.
We're all legal.
That's right.
No fair use or anything here. It's total fair use.
That's right.
No copyright violations for us.
That's right.
Take that, you censors.
All right, we'll see you soon.